Hello, thank you for coming to this IFEAC webinar. Today is a very special day because in the middle of a third wave of COVID infection, we still keep on working. So today we host Ilyas Mamadiarov, who's a PhD candidate at INALCO and a research associate at IFEAC, who will be presenting research entitled Poverty and Microfinance in Post-Soviet Kyrgyzstan. And then his presentation will be commented by our distinguished colleague Balihar Sanghera from University of Kent. And I'm so happy he accepted the invitation today. Both like prominent specialists in political economy, they know very well the region. Ilyas, of course, especially Kyrgyzstan, whether Balihar knows several countries in the region. And please, I've talked too much already and I'm sick. So Ilyas, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Adrian. Thank you very much, Balihar, for accepting this invitation, especially in view of the large amount of work, your work, which concentrates on microfinance in Central Asia. And in my specific case, it's Kyrgyzstan. As Adrian mentioned, the focus of my thesis work is microfinance and evolution of microfinance in Kyrgyzstan. And before really going into the topic of microfinance, I'd like to show you in my presentation today the short trailer. It's done by the Danish independent journalist Thomas Heinemann, and it's a documentary which was released in 2011, and it's entitled Microdebt, and I'll let you just collect the information from the.
This idea, which began in Jobra, is spread around the world. There are now Grameen type programs in almost every country in the world.
I think that we need to give Mohammed Yunus credit for spreading the idea that you can do business with the poor.
It almost has irresistible magic to it. You give a little money to a poor person, the poor person invests, make money, and they pay the money back. And boom, poverty is solved.
Te dan el préstamo a cambio de que les digas que vas a hacer algún negocio. Entonces yo tenía la idea de tener pollos, pero no funcionó.
From the Nobel Committee's point of view, it was fighting poverty that was a major thing for us.
Most people now are taking out microloans in order to repay old loans or to repay microloans to other microfinance institutions. And the poor are gradually becoming trapped in a web of microdebt.
Most people in the world are not entrepreneurs. Not all of us can become Bill Gates. Why do we expect that poor people are different?
They'll never get out of poverty because when you have to pay 30, 40, 50, sometimes 100% interest rate, what business makes that kind of profit?
Microfinance can give you a lot of return. But our question is, who should be benefiting from return? Is it the poor people or the organizations who are practicing microfinance?
I firmly believe that we can create a poverty-free world if we collectively believe in it.
Mohammed Yunus said that credit is a human right, but he never said that debt is a human right. But the other side of credit is debt.
So the full documentary you can actually access on YouTube by following the following link. I'd like to just mention one, because it lasts 50 minutes, and the year that the documentary was released in 2011, because that year will resonate a little bit later, back when I'll be stopping by the article that Yunus actually published in New York Times. I think when the microfinance was enshrouded by this scandal and the entire set of the trajectory of microfinance. We'll come back to that concept a little bit later. So for my presentation today, I'd like to stop by the following concepts. First of all, I'll just quickly stop by the theoretical framework. I will not be spending most of the time because time is limited, but I'll try to give you the general idea of my dissertation, my thesis, where through which angle of approach that I'm looking at the subject of lending, microfinance, and fighting the poverty. And then I'll just quickly stop by the poverty in Kyrgyzstan, and we'll also look at the evolution of microfinance in Kyrgyzstan. And there I'll stop by some discoveries I did, the findings that I found during the archiving work and the field work that I did, and also some statistical data that I've gathered through the annual, all the data that I've gathered are based on the annual reports of the Central Bank of Kyrgyzstan, as well as the Statistical Committee of the Kyrgyz Republic. So let's start. First, let me stop by the economically. I titled this slide "Economic Neoliberalism: Revisiting the Paradigm." We all know that we have whenever we study in the Anglo-Saxon world, even in the Francophone world, when we study the subject of economics, the textbooks of economics present the idea for such phenomenon as money or debt and even trust. We'll stop by that, but money as something as an instrument that has been invented by the society to alleviate the difficulties of the barter economy. And money is represented as an item which stores the value, unit of account, and intermediary of exchange. Money actually is something that is secondary that helps to alleviate the barter economy. And that historically that idea is, when we trace that idea, it all goes to the titan of the economist, Adam Smith, in the Wealth of Nations, when Adam Smith looked at the structure of society, and up to, some 1,000 pages that the Wealth of Nations have, this voluminous work, Adam Smith offered and proposed the idea that the money has been invented by the study in order to alleviate the difficulties, the challenges that barter economy would pose to the society. But for the last 50 years, probably even more, but at least for the past 50 years, I can say that there has been a rising number of the schools of thoughts that contest this idea that money has been presented as a way to alleviate the barter economy. The entirety of the barter economy is also something that a contentious phenomenon, because anthropologists who've been making a lot of historical findings that found that it's not necessarily that the barter economy precedes the money. Even the question of the barter economy, if the barter economy at all existed, that's another the question that anthropologists actually pose. And one of the strong schools of thoughts is derived from stems from the French school of thought, which is called economic conventions, and the prominent theorists of economic conventions are André Orléans, Michel Agliata, who refer much to the works of Karl Polanyi, as well as the other Marcel Mauss, prominent anthropological economist. And the André Orléans has a really nice book, also written in English. You can access The Empire of Value, New Foundation of Economics, where the economists actually look at the idea of money not as something that a state has actually invented. Money is globally viewed as a language. Language allows us to communicate with other people. Language is something that unites, actually acts as an interdependent element that connects individuals. So Agliata and Orléans actually argue that money represents the social trust. It's a social link that connects the individuals between each other. It's a complicated theory. If I go a little bit deeper, I'm going to suffice it to say that when we look at the classical economy and economic neoliberalism, we represent individuals. Individuals are individuals. The entire idea, the central tenet of economic neoliberalism concentrates upon the individual. Individual as a person who is responsible for his own decision making, who depending on the utility that certain commodity procures to him, can place his preferences upon that utility. There's a certain that all the preferences and the assessment of the value of the certain commodity actually derive it from the direct interaction between the individual and the commodity. But the commodity itself is also something that is economic. The neoliberalism in the classical economy is stripped of all of the social, aesthetic, or the religious values. For instance, if we look at the Karl Polanyi in The Great Transformation, Karl Polanyi argues that in the feudal society, when the land ownership actually, when the land ownership existed, and once the feudal society actually stopped existing, the land became the property that can be commodity, that can be easily transferred from one individual to another individual. Polanyi actually highlights that brought a great suffering to peasants. Why? Because the land wasn't just treated as a property. The land was treated as something that is related to a certain family's identity. His certain family's ancestral roots. And so that just giving the land itself also meant that the destruction of the social status, destruction of the social values. So Polanyi actually warns against this type of the treatment of the commodities, which is stripped of all of the values, which in economic neoliberalism argues that the commodity should be purely treated from the perspective of the utility that the commodity procures to certain individuals. So having said that, the idea of the debt, for instance, another notion which is classical economy says debt is something quantifiable that one individual owes to another individual, and that the one who owes to another individual can reimburse it through the payment. But the entire idea of the debt is that debt is not just something that is from the economic neoliberalism. It should not be only viewed with that. Debt can involve a huge array of the social dynamic that can be involved in violence, that can be involved in compromise, that can be involved in conflict resolution, that is also involves the moral obligation that Greiber, one of the renowned also anthropologist, economic anthropologist, American anthropologist, his voluminous book is titled Debt. He says that the entire problem, conflict between the borrower and the lender is not just simply the fact that someone fails to pay the debt, quantifiable amount, but the act of debt itself, the debt also denotes this moral obligation that the person can never be acquitted of, you can never pay this moral obligation. So, and Jean-Michel Servet, another renowned French economist, in his argument also says that the debt is what that is. Debt is the foundation of the society. Basically, debt connects interdependence between individuals. Debt actually acts as a social link between individuals. So, and it should not be simply viewed from the perspective of the quantifiable amount that one person owes to another. And the trust in this case, I really closely also explored the notion of trust. Trust also means that for the economic convention, trust is inextricably related with the idea of money. As I said, we're really limited in terms of timing here, so I'll just pass by. But if you have more questions, I'll gladly stop by, because this is a voluminous work. There's an entire sort of theory that's proposed by Economie de Convention School, Economy of Convention School of Thought. But this will ring a bell once we will go to the issue of microfinance in Kyrgyzstan, and we'll come back to, you'll see how it's related. So the issue of poverty in Kyrgyzstan, if you just explore, if you see the chart, the blue line indicates the poverty in Kyrgyzstan through the 2007 to 2020. And this is the data available through World Bank microdata, especially with the COVID impact of COVID, the poverty has really risen sharply. If you can see, just this jump from 20 to 30%. So I think it's even more than 30%. This is just the best case projection that's provided by World Bank, and it dates back to sometimes January 2021, so beginning of the year that the World Bank released. So the projection, the anticipate growth of GDP is not to take place before 2022 in case with Kyrgyzstan. So when we talk about Kyrgyzstan, we're talking about the country, one of the poorest countries in post-Soviet space. It depends, of course, based on the data which is available through the World Bank, and also what has to be said about the Kyrgyzstan is that this is one of the second, if I believe it's second or third country which is highly dependent in the world, which is highly dependent on remittances from migrant workers. Those workers, the Kyrgyz who work in Russia, in this case, in specific case of those who work in Russia, 1/3, 27% of GDP, the country's GDP actually is derived, stemmed from the remittances that's sent by the Kyrgyz migrant from Russia. So the COVID actually had a huge impact on the economy because it really immobilized the mobility of the migrant workers. There was really very difficult to travel. The traveling has been, limited. So as you can see that impacted a lot to the poverty. This is just one side of the effect of the poverty, the COVID and the case. And then finally, I'd like to say that with more poverty rising, number of poor rising, the more there will be the need for micro loans. This is just to presents an ideal terrain for MFIs, microfinance institutions, to operate on the soil like this. So, in my archiving work, when I'm still continuing doing this, I found the early signs of microfinance in Kyrgyzstan dates back to 1999, and these two pictures, in 1999, the internet wasn't really widespread. So one of the accessible channels of the communication was newspapers, and renowned, widely spread newspaper entitled Vecherny Bishkek, where articles were published by not just the clients, the borrowers, but also in this specific case by those agencies that actually launched the microfinance. In this specific case, in 1999, the article says, "Вставай, и тебе помогут," to rise up and they will help you. So the second article, which dates of 2000, Finka, орудие предпринимателя. Finka is one of the MFIs. It's a tool of the entrepreneurs. So the two articles discuss the importance of microfinance, the importance of the microloans. And in the beginning, in 1999, the focus was to select the pilot villages in Kyrgyzstan and give them group loans. Group loans are basically giving them a loan to certain individual, but without a collateral, and the trust would act as a collateral between those individuals. So what I really noticed in this article is that they all focus on the return of the loan, the percentage of the return of the loan. From the beginning, the percentage of the return of the loan. So from the beginning, we're really focusing on the way the MFIs, the institutions are returning. The success of the microfinance is related to, as long as there's a return of the loan, then it's ipso facto or automatic by default we're considering as a success. From the beginning, the strategy, you can see rhetoric. Also, what's notable in this early signs of microfinance is that it started with the international projects of the UN of alleviating the poverty by the help of the World Bank. So this is just to give you the historic background for microfinance. So you can see in Kyrgyzstan, legally, in fact, even though microfinance agencies, as I said, started according to the articles in 1999, even earlier, 1995, officially, when the legally of microfinance has started in 2002. That's the year when the central bank, Kyrgyz National Bank, actually adopted the law on microfinance, and which officially declares the function of the microfinance. We'll stop by that. But this just give you an absolute number of the microfinance. You can see the booming number of the microfinance in Kyrgyzstan. Actually, today Kyrgyzstan is, according to Fitzgerald, one of the sole countries in Central Asia which has the most number of MFIs, so microfinance institutions. So up to 2011, the number of microfinance has really, blossomed. It's a mushroom. And then the central bank adopted more tighter regulations and revoked the license of many microfinance. But so we have today some 130 microfinance institutions in the country. But this is just an absolute number. So I'll go by the loan. By the loan ratio. But before that, let me stop by the legal framework. When we look at the legal framework, the purpose of activities of microfinance, Article 2 of the Kyrgyz Republic on microfinance, 2002 law says that microfinance, the goal is to provide affordable service to help overcome poverty, increase employment, promote the development of entrepreneurship, and mobilization of population increase. But you can see that the key term is to help overcome the poverty. We'll see that the terminology which is used today by the MFI institutions to justify the unjustifiable, the unequally, unfairly set interest rates when they provide the loans to the borrowers. We'll come by that. But at the same time, what's curiously, in 2013, the law has been adopted. At the same time, microfinance organization has a right to pursue other goals determined by its constituent document. So basically, you can see that it has been, the scope of the activities of microfinance has been enlarged. So we will come by the article of the Yunus when he explains what prompts microfinance, and that can be related to that. In the summer, I will stop by that. So the total loans to GDP ratio, this talks more about the microfinance. You can see that up to 7% of the GDP of Kyrgyzstan is this is the credit portfolio of microfinance. Up to 7% from the GDP actually constitutes the microfinance loans. It actually fell drastically in 2014. Why? Because several key major microfinance institutions transformed themselves into banks. It does not mean that the microfinance loans actually decreased in number. Actually, this just means that those microfinance institutions, once they transformed into banks, they still continue. They do have their own clientele they work with. They do provide the loans still, but they're not classified as more by the statistical committee as microfinance loans. So that's why you can see this drastic fall in the market, but it does not mean that the loans has been decreased in number. Another interesting case about the microfinance is that you can see this here is the total number of microcredit recipients, at least the reported number of microcredit recipients, because there's another problem of the report that has been raised if the microfinance institutions are transparent enough to provide the real number of the recipients. But at least the reported number of microfinance recipients, you can see it ranges from, it goes up to 600,000 in person. But what is curious, what's really interesting is to look at the ratio of women who actually make up out of the total recipient. It's always beyond 50%. Basically, a woman constitutes the major amount of the borrowers, always the dominant. And it's not surprising to see that from the beginning, when Yunus actually invented the microloans, he said that specifically he had in mind to loan for the woman. And the publicity of microfinance is that when you give a loan to the poor, especially the poor woman, you have having the more loan, the poor woman, the vulnerable woman can use this loan to launch either entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurial business, also to have broader access to education, also have better health check, and basically the idea is that to woman empowerment. That's the message that has been shaped by the microfinance from the beginning. give more to. But at the same time, we need to look at the historical context, in my opinion, because in the I think it's also has to do with the heritage of Soviet Union, when we have the more women actually involved in the household financial aspects. For instance, there's been a study 2019 by a German German bank, Sparstrassen, in collaboration with National Bank of Kyrgyzstan, with a random sample of 1,000 households. When in the survey they asked the household family members who is in charge of the household finances, and it was the man who was pointed out as designed as someone who was in charge. But whenever the aspects of how much money was spent, how much money was borrowed, who actually borrowed, it was always the woman who was more informed about the financial aspects of the household. So that comes in striking difference if we'll actually look at the Maghrebian countries, where in recent podcast, when I listened to microfinancing by experts, that in Maghrebian countries, especially Morocco, when there was a microfinance crisis 10 years ago, I believe, when we checked who were the clients, it were mostly the men who were actually borrowers. So you can see that the interesting social aspect here. Now, let me stop by the microfinance. There's been a wave of anti-debt movement in Kyrgyzstan. It actually never worked. You can see that the poverty level has been, even though the poverty level has been, we were able to decrease to 20%, but it's never actually, there was a huge, the vulnerability of the poverty was really, really high, which means that whenever there was a little shock, the poverty really rises very fast. So the anti-debt movement, I'm taking just two cases of anti-debt movement. 2016, when a crowd of women gathered in front of the United States embassy, saying that the microcredit is a debt trap in Bishkek, that took place in Bishkek, and that they demanded the closure of all the major MFIs, the loaning companies, because of the draconian interest rates that they charge, and that they're unable to pay back. 2021, the recent another protest of women, when they, close to Bishkek, the suburban city, when a group of women actually locked themselves inside the local government building, and they threatened to burn themselves because they were not able to pay their loans. And interesting here, one interesting thing I noticed that the social media, today's social media is a very powerful actor, as we know. If you look at Facebook or Instagram, the general rhetoric is this: if this woman knew that they wouldn't be able to pay, why did they take the loan? If you take the loan, you need to pay it back. This was the general rhetoric on all. What brains did you use in order, when you were actually taking the loan? Why did you take the loan if you knew that you're not able to pay? And now you threaten this. This is just a general rhetoric tendency that you can see, discourse that is in the society. If you so the fault is not the MFIs. The fault, it goes to the irresponsible borrowers, the borrowers who are unable right now. They protest. So they should have actually thought before actually taking the loan. This is the general trend when you see the réseaux sociaux, the social networks, when you look at that. So, but if we look at the interest rate, this is also based on the reports of annual reports of the Central Bank of Kyrgyzstan. The bars here, histograms here, show the sectors of the economy where the loans is basically on the paper where the loans is supposed to be channeled. And the black line on the top shows the percentage rate, the average weighted percentage rate of the micro. If you can, one trend you see that it's always be above the 30%. And in his article, and I'll stop by because I think because we have other things to cover. In his article in 2011, Yunus actually said and you can find it on New York Times, sacrifice microcredit for microcredit. Yunus said that the maximum microcredit, microfinance, MFI should be setting the micro interest rate should be 25%, not exceeding 25%. And then microfinance, so from 15 to 25%. So in case of Kyrgyzstan, you can see that it's way beyond the 25%. And this is declared interest rate, because in my research, I found that sometimes it's not always transparent when it comes to interest rate. So, and then to specifically to the article of Yunus, that, Yunus says in 70s, when he invented actually the idea of microcredit, he intended to fight the loan sharks. The entire idea was to give loans to people, especially poor women, who could actually use the loans to extricate themselves out of the poverty trap. And it says, at the same time, I never imagined that one day microcredit would give rise to its own breed of loan sharks. And further in the article, he says, troubles with microcredit began around 2001. Because of this, when lenders started looking for ways to make a profit on the loans by shifting from their status of non-profit organizations to commercial enterprises. So Yunus actually acknowledged in 2011 that there's been actually a digression, there's been a rift in the microfinance. There's been so it hasn't been actually following its own, the goals that has been set from the beginning. And in Kyrgyzstan, MFIs are considered as commercial organizations. When you look at the law, the law specifically designs microfinance organizations as commercial organizations. And then, so when I look at the field studies, my field studies, I looked at two families that this is just the anthropological part of my observations. One family, Jamila, she has 5 children, 11 grandchildren, all without higher education, all her children without higher education. 3 out of 5 children work in Russia, and she's really in a high financial vulnerability state. What happens is she's been a regular borrower of microloans since 2000, all the way goes to 2004, 2005. I wasn't able to track exactly when actually the first loan happened, but the curious thing is that microfinance never actually helped her to get her children education, or all her children are they don't have education. And then right now, currently, she has 4 microloans that she's paying. And how she manages to pay that, her children actually send remittances from Russia, and she pays those remittances. The remittances actually never come as help her to purchase food, but she has her own pension to spend for the food and the items of the basic needs and necessities. But the problem is, the fundamental problem that we see here is that should we be blaming her for regularly taking the loans? Do we have this type of right? Because the common rhetoric in the MFIs is that once the borrower takes the money, he is obliged to take it to pay it back. That's the common rhetoric, and there's this common, and I'm basing my observation to the Sanghera's and Satibaldivas recent article on debt, where 2 authors actually really well actually target this, explain the fact that MFIs and the banks actually what they do, they take they adopt this neoliberal economic approach to the poor, taking the poor out of the context, and within the context of unequal power relations, the poor, without having all of the other options, the poor have to, they're left only with one option, to take the loan. And oftentimes we blame the poor that they don't, if I may say, vulnerable population. We blame the vulnerable population that they should read the contract, and they should be more critical about when they make purchases and the consumption expenses. But at the same time, the behavioral economists studied, the dimension of the poor, the behavioral, the conduct of the poor, and then found out the poverty itself being in the poverty itself is very mind taxing. It actually reduces the intellectual ability of the people. And so do we have this also the right? We should be actually looking in the broader aspect. And I'm basing my observation to the study of Banerjee, Abhijit, and Mulanathan, The Shape of the Temptation, Implication for the Economic Lives. And there's also other study, Matthew Desmond, written a really well-known thesis on the poverty in the United States, where he actually argues that we shouldn't be, we should look in depth of the problem, more in depth of the problem. So with that said, we have another case of another family that I'm also observing. Aykhanish, she has 4 children, 2 are college graduates, 1 BA degree, another has vocational degree, but right now the second child is pursuing her BA right now. 3 grandchildren. She has low financial vulnerability. 10 years ago, she was considered as a really poor family. Right now, the local village municipality, she was taken out of the list of the vulnerable poor person. And she has a really positive view of the microfinance. She considers the microfinance helped her to extricate herself out of the poverty. So, but if you look at, if you look in depth, if you explore in depth her history, her historical background, you can see that one of the items why she was able to extricate herself out of it, because she lost her husband when her children were quite young, and there's another association, Islamic association, that's been helping her children, giving a hefty substantial amount of the money to help this as a health orphans. So she had the social benefits coming from another source, and her elder son got married a little bit later. Interestingly, her elder son got married last week when I was invited to his marriage. He's 31 years old. For the village, that he's considered as what the village resident called him chal. Chal means an old man, derogatory term for someone who is old, who wasn't able to, who did not succeed to get married earlier when he was in the early 20s. But he did not get married on time because he invested his opportunity to collect this. You can see the car, it belongs to him. 5 years ago, he did not have this car. He was riding a bicycle. Also the cattle behind the shed, he did not have this all. He built this all because he refrained from having more kids. And Matthew Desmond in his study of the poverty says that oftentimes, most of the times, the evictions in the United States of the poor happen because of the children. The more children, there's the statistical correlation, the more children you have, the more it's difficult, the higher the chances that you'll encounter the difficulties to extricate yourself out of the poverty, especially if you're already in the vulnerable position. So he built his own, it was a wise decision though. So you can see there's a success story, but was it related to specific to microfinance? That's under question. And she's also regarded as someone who is very responsible borrower who pays back to her loans on time. And the MFIs actually took a picture of her house and show her all the time and that she was able to extricate herself out of the product because of the MFIs. So there's this publicity of the MFIs. So a couple of my interview excerpts from my interviews is that, and this comes from the employees of MFI actually in Kyrgyzstan. One of the employees who works in the microfinance rating company says, nobody knows the precise effect of microfinance in Kyrgyzstan. It's possible the MFI activity rather contributes to poverty than alleviates it. There's an anecdotal evidence of a family's kid being taken as a hostage by an employee of MFI who demanded repayment of the loan. Due to the high competition present among them, there's very high competition. A practice exists when a microfinance agent would denounce its best client as irresponsible, so the client had no option but to stick with the existing MFI. So what happens is that the one MFI would denounce someone as irresponsible borrower, so that that borrower wouldn't be able to go to another MFI, would only stick with only one MFI, one microfinance agency to get more loans. From the side of the MFIs, you can see that the way they position their view. we're already working with the most vulnerable. Just look at the amount of loans from the microfinance sector. Then it is the state that must take care of this issue of social responsibility. So it's not us, it's not MFI that should be working with the problem of poverty. One must not rest everything on the shoulders of microfinance. Finally, the law makes it clear that the microfinance agency is a commercial organization. The microfinance sector operates under difficult conditions to be able to present written reports on the source of the income of clients because of the many borrowers who were protesting. Central bank actually is demanding the microfinance to check the source of income of clients. But we must not forget that we give loans to people who do not have access to stable employment, those whom banks refuse to give loans. So we still have to recognize that we're helping the poor. So the entire idea of from the microfinance is that the targeting message is that whenever the loans are repaid, then there's a success. But ultimately we should look, I mean, is it the success that the loans are repaid 99%, almost 99% repayment of the loans? If the loans continue to be, and the microfinance sector also hails about the number of the clients that they have, but we should also we should also ask ourselves, is it the numbers of clients or the fact that you're losing the clients that you should be actually proud of? Because if you lose the clients, once the poor, someone who's financially vulnerable, takes the loan and becomes a successful entrepreneur, then there's no more need to get the loan. So if you lose the client, then that's possible. That should be probably the message that we should be spreading, not the fact that that you have the higher percentage of the clients and the higher percentage of the loan return. But the loan return itself does not demonstrate that the fact that you're helping alleviate the poverty. So there has been this digression from the original path that microfinance pursued, as Muhammad Yunus said, and there's a need to return to that, and that MFI actually produced their own loan sharks, and sadly. So with that said, let me show you a short video by Esther Duflo. She's a French-American economist who received a Nobel Prize in 2000, if I'm not mistaken, 2018 or 2017, for her work in collaboration with Banerjee Apiji on her work on the poverty and her take on microfinance in 2017.
And you will be concluding, right, then afterwards?
What?
You will be concluding after this?
Yeah, this is the final. This is
great.
Okay.
En fait, les économistes ont cru au microcrédit parce que on croit au repas gratuit quand il y a une invention qui permet disons, d'ouvrir une possibilité qui n'était pas là avant. Et l'idée, c'est que si avant, les banques n'étaient pas capables de prêter aux plus pauvres, et que maintenant je trouve une technologie pour le faire, en utilisant le fait que les gens se connaissent bien entre eux et donc sont capables de se surveiller les uns les autres et se choisir les uns les autres, et que maintenant ça devient possible de prêter aux plus pauvres. Avant, ce n'était pas possible. Maintenant, c'est possible. Si les pauvres remboursent, je n'ai pas perdu d'argent, je peux même en gagner si je mets un taux d'intérêt suffisamment élevé, et les pauvres sont capables d'emprunter. Et donc l'idée de Yunus, c'était les pauvres, avec ces emprunts, ils vont lancer des entreprises. Bon, la première partie, il avait raison, c'est-à-dire c'est possible de prêter aux pauvres. Et ça, c'est une invention qui est une invention importante. Mais la deuxième partie, il avait tort. C'est-à-dire qu'une fois que les gens ont un emprunt, une fois que les gens prennent un emprunt, ce qu'ils font avec, dans l'immense majorité des cas, c'est qu'ils s'achètent quelque chose dont ils ont besoin, dont ils ont envie, mais qui ne commencent pas un business. Par exemple, un frigidaire, un vélo, etc. Et après, ils vont travailler un petit peu plus dans le travail qu'ils ont déjà pour rembourser la dette. Et c'est vraiment une minorité très, très, très extrême de gens qui prennent l'argent soit pour commencer une nouvelle activité, soit pour étendre l'activité qu'ils ont déjà. Et du coup, le résultat, c'est que le microcrédit, c'est un petit peu comme une carte de crédit, en fait. Une carte de crédit pour les pauvres. Et c'est très bien, les cartes de crédit. Ça permet aux gens de faire des choses qu'ils ne pourraient pas faire autrement, mais ça ne les sort pas de la pauvreté. Et ça, c'est des résultats que j'ai pu trouver avec les équipes avec lesquelles j'ai travaillé, mais qui ont été répétés dans plusieurs contextes, qu'on aille de l'Éthiopie à l'Inde, en Bosnie-Herzégovine, même en France. Les effets du microcrédit sont zéro. sur la sortie de la pauvreté, l'augmentation de la consommation, même le lissage de la consommation, etc. Il n'y a simplement pas d'effet.
All right. So the concluding remarks is that there's a need to revisit entire idea of entire trajectory that MFI is actually pursuing right now in Kyrgyzstan, and also on theoretical level, we should also be revisiting the paradigm and asking ourselves what are the implications of those paradigms when it comes to real life situation. I mean, the practical implications. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ilyas. Was extremely interesting. I knew nothing about microfinance, so it's really great. And now we will hear from Balihar Sanghera, our colleague from the University of Kent. Comments, questions, I'm sure he will be discussing your paper.
Thank you. And first, thank you, Andre, and thank you, Ilyas, for a really fascinating discussion on microfinance in Kyrgyzstan. I really enjoyed your presentation. I thought it was fascinating how you were able to combine both the quantitative and the qualitative dimension of finance. So yeah, really, really fascinating presentation. Just to say how I think the work that you're doing is quite important, partly because I don't think there's adequate attention on microfinance in Central Asia, as you know. So it's very much welcomed that that your study sheds light on this very murky area of the economy, and I think this is very much important work that you are doing. I thought you know, that your current work covered the key issues really well, addressing, you know, the nature of the expansion, the mushrooming of microfinance, but then how also microfinance, the early pioneers like Bartishum and others quickly became commercialized. I thought you kind of explained that really well. I thought you, theoretically, I thought you did a good job in trying to discuss the commodification of money. All too often when we think about Polanyi, we invariably think about land and labor, but right. It's also about money. And that doesn't get as much attention as land and labor.
There's also this. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. There's also to give the audience more implications from this commodification of the money. For instance, the Orléans and Miagliata propose this idea. Imagine if we commodify the human embryons on the market. If we are selling the human embryons, freely transparent human embryos, I think that's the case right now, probably, but their book was written in 2002, but it raises so many aesthetical questions, and it's connected with family identity, human embryos. And it's just the question of, should we consider human embryos as human, basically, and then we're selling the human. So it comes with huge attachments, social attachments. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, you know, no, you spot on the increasing commodification of life. And I thought you also did quite well theoretically trying to critique existing literature that all too often tends to treat economic life as if it's just atomistic individuals. And I thought you showed quite well how money is a social relationship. It's a social relationship that involves trust, morality, but also importantly, power, and how these three elements of trust, morality, and power intertwine. And rather than just, as I said, all too often just try to individualize it. So I thought those points were all you made quite well. But I do have some questions, right? As you would expect, right? These aren't particularly critical questions. They're really just to kind of get you to interrogate a bit more about your study. Just to kind of, and then to be honest, I suspect, Ilyas, you've already thought about these questions already. And so just an opportunity for you to say a bit more about it. Then obviously you were kind of restricted to say what you in this presentation. So really an opportunity to expand on what you've already probably are thinking. Firstly, I suppose, all too often in the literature, the discussion is around debt, and you talked about David Graeber, etc. But I think the focus should be more about interest rather than debt. The problem isn't about debt. We all need to take credit to meet life's challenges. You know, if you've got a leaking roof, or if you need a medical emergency, yeah, you probably need to get out some sort of credit because you don't earn enough. The problem isn't so much about credit or debt. The problem is around the interest that's charged on the credit and how that interest becomes compound interest and increases exponentially.
That's right.
Which then leads to the problem of, as you were explaining in the first video, about people taking out loans in order to pay out existing loans. So when people are paying back the loan or the debt, they're not just paying out the initial capital, the principal, they're largely also paying the considerable interest. So I think there needs to be more theorization around interest, which then brings the question of how do you theorize that, right? How do you theorize the interest? What legitimacy, what moral legitimacy is there around interest? Although Graeber talks much about debt and one's obligation to pay back debt, I'm not sure what he talks adequately around why it is that we have to pay out the interest, or what legitimacy people have around interest. You know, during the Soviet Union, interest was seen as parasitic, as unearned income, income that was not derived through one's labor, but merely through one's power over capital or over one's ownership and control over money. So one's ability to extract rent or to extract income from other people, i.e. the borrowers, is merely based on power. It's not based on morality. Yes, there's trust that the person's going to pay you back, but all economic relationships, as Durkheim says, is based on non-contractual elements. So what is the morality upon which lenders extract rent, extract income, unearned income from the borrowers? And I think this is where the discussion of morality becomes important, because when you go into this further, it becomes clear that there is very little morality in there, other than the fact that the lender is able to charge interest at 30%, 40%, as your graph showed, the weighted average of 30 plus. And as you also point out, in many cases, it goes up to even higher, 80%, etc. So what is the legitimacy, the moral legitimacy for these kinds of activities? And I think you could have done a bit more to kind of explore that element, rather than just thinking about debt as a relationship of trust. Well, clearly it is, but what about the nature of morality around interest? And then, of course, what you then have is the tension between power and morality. How is it that as Marx would say, the ruling class is able to define the ruling ideas?
That's right.
Especially around ideas about what ought the poor ought to pay back their obligations. Who defines the obligations? On what basis are these obligations grounded in. And I said, it's kind of interesting. I've just got a couple more comments and then I will stop. Of course, it's kind of interesting that that usury, because that's what it is, isn't it? Interest is usury, has been for a large part of, human history, has been condemned. And I think what's interesting about microfinance is how this has become legitimate economic practice for the wealthy and the rich, as you point out, how it becomes commercialized to serve the interest of, in large part, of the West. It should be noted, Western elites. I mean, what's interesting about the demonstration that you pointed out, I think on one of your slides about the protesters, the anti-debt movement there. And you had the picture there, didn't you? Yes, of 2016, that those demonstrators were demonstrating outside the American embassy. Well, why were they demonstrating outside the American embassy? Was it just random? Was it that they just said, "Oh well, let's pick out an embassy"? Okay, oh well, flick a coin or take something out of a hat. And let's determine where we. How come they didn't demonstrate outside the embassy of the French embassy, or of the Italian embassy, or of the Belarus embassy? Why was it the American embassy?
Good observation.
Right. So I think, well, clearly, because microfinance relates to global capital and the interest of Western US capital. And I think you could have kind of brought that out much more. And of course, we'll just leave that point out. And of course, Amira Satwadeva talks about this a bit more in her work. And just, I think, when you are thinking about morality, yes, I suppose, there is a usual focus, isn't there, that borrowers should be honorable people, should be deserving, that they should be honorable people, show moral integrity and pay back what they've taken, right? And a lot of morality tends to be couched in these terms. But I think that's just one side of morality. The other side of morality is looking at the consequences of interest on people's well-being. That's also an important part of morality. To what extent do microfinance have adverse effect on people's well-being, right? That's also an important part of morality. It's not merely about duty to repay back one's loan, but it's also about how it has an impact on people's human needs, their mental well-being. And I think this comes out more, I think, in your qualitative research, where you discuss how borrowers discuss the stresses and strains that they feel as a result of taking out the loans. And I think what I call your second picture there, where you have those pictures, the other about the protesters. Well, clearly that's about people saying they just had enough. They took out these loans. It had an immense negative effect. So I think this, you also need to incorporate this aspect of morality into your analysis, rather than just talking about, well, it's a contractual basis, took out the loans, then it's their duty, one's honor to repay. And finally, my one final comment here is, and you kind of ended on this, didn't you? Towards the end, I think your final video explored this. What's the alternative? What can be the alternative form in which credit can be allocated? in a way that minimizes the source of the problem. What's the source of the problem? Clearly, it's interest, right? What can be done to mitigate the impact of interest? And is there a way of shaping, allocating, distributing credit in such ways that it doesn't result in huge usury? I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Many thanks, Balihar, indeed, for these, I guess, stimulating comments. Before we allow the public to ask questions to Ilyas, I imagine Ilyas would want to answer Balihar's remarks shortly, if possible.
Okay. I'll try to keep it very short. Yes, Balihar, you're absolutely right. With regards to demonstrations in front of the USA, that was a very acute observation, really acute. United States, right? The demonstrating right in front of the United States is a country that embodies the center of the capitalism. You can see that they are being exploited by this capitalistic machine, the entire sector. But the problem, the subject of interest is something that I'm still exploring, and specifically I'm referring to your article in Such Beliefs article, where well, first of all, let me just say, I'm not against at all the credit. Credit is very good, as Duflo said also, it's good. Credit is good. Here we're talking about the capitalist machine that, by virtue of having the power, sets the unjustifiable interest rates. And using those interest rates, they siphon off the benefits to pocket the benefits to themselves. So here again, I'm criticizing the neoliberalist economists. We just say that the loan is in between the borrower and lender. When we have Pettifor and Keene, who actually says the loan is not just there, it's also the bank that is in between that is involved here. And especially with regards to the region, it's the interest rate that has implications all the way to elitist group that have appropriated the properties and they engage in rent-seeking activities and charge the unjustifiable interest rate to exploit further the vulnerable population. And the morality and the discourse all fall well to their advantage. They avail themselves of those discourses in rhetoric, widely spread rhetoric. But you're absolutely right. I will be exploring further in depth this issue of interest.
Okay, would that be all?
Yes, I'll try to keep it short.
Okay, fantastic.
I can go on if you want.
No, that's great. That's really great because it leaves a lot of space for members of our public. So this is really great. You must have seen, Ilyas and probably Balihar, that we have the honor to host today the French ambassador in Kyrgyzstan. So you can just have a look at the various comments he posted on the chat. I think it can be stimulating. And is there anyone in the public who would like to ask questions to Ilyas? I see, 9 persons here connected. So even 11. So
okay. There was one comment I wrote, the alternative, what kind of alternative plan that I suggest. And if there's no question, then if you allow, but I'll leave it to you. I would like to comment on that too.
Please, if you feel like asking a question, don't be shy. Otherwise, I can ask myself. Can you hear me, Ilyas?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so I'm abusing of my dominant position as always. I'm so sorry. But then can you tell us a bit more about your methods? meaning that, as pointed at the beginning of his remarks by Balihar, you both rely on quantitative data from the World Bank and the local financial institutions, and also you do field work, like you meet with people who really were granted these microloans and so on. So how do you articulate this in your approach? I mean, how can you treat these two kinds of data and then make of it sense?
Okay, should I be okay? First, why not let me go? I think the best result of any research is when you use it as a combined method. So not everything in life is quantifiable. And as Balihar rightly noted about the well-being, what is well-being? How should be just to look at the well-being through the quantifiable methods, like having a property, certain property that makes the person having, in a good, well-off, put themselves in a well-off situation. Also, we should be looking at the psychological and moral aspects of all the transactions, which actually the quantifiable aspect of transaction failed to grasp. You can't quantify the normative aspect of the research. That has to be treated on the actually going to in the field, observing, and because the key issues that we are looking at, such concepts as money, debt, and trust, these remain the issues that involve an array of social aspects that cannot be simply grasped by the quantity. So therefore, I try to get the qualitative aspect and the quantitative aspect of in the research, and then they combine together. They give a better picture of the problem.
Okay, so I guess this is like real political economy in the noble sense. It's really great. So I really would like to empower members of the public who seem to be a little shy and we don't even see their faces. Yeah, I'm trying to stimulate them. Otherwise, I think among the three of us, we can keep on discussing, and it's really nice. I would love to organize this with a cup of tea. Unfortunately, it's not possible today. So Balihar, if you want to go on. We can't hear you. I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
No? Okay.
Sorry, I got the impression that Ilyas wanted to discuss the question about alternatives.
Yes. So if you give me a floor, I'd like to, yeah, that's definitely, as a researcher, it's our obligation to not only criticize the current problematic, but also propose certain alternatives and the mechanisms to solve the problem. That's the idea of the entire research when we do the research. So I do agree with Sanghera, Satyabalihar and Sanghera's article, Balihar's article, so in collaboration with Elmira, where at the end they propose to impose the stricter governmental regulations over the sector, so that and those regulations must be transparent, actually, so that only through transparency we could actually achieve certain type of the progress in this sector. Also, the sector, as Balihar mentioned in the beginning, is a murky sector. It's something that is a sector that does not tolerate easily a criticism, because from the beginning, the publicity of microfinance was that we're helping the poor, and giving the more loans, the more repayment. That means that that's the key target. And also, very importantly, I have to say, I must say that I'm obliged to say that not all microfinance institutions are bad. It's just there's the commercialization of microfinance institutions that led to this loan sharking mechanisms, and especially taking the social context, political context and historical context of Central Asia, it led to the fact that those who were in power ended up appropriating these properties and using the interest rate to charging interest, higher interest rate. So the alternative in this case, I believe, is that we need to give also, besides the stricter government regulations, also raise awareness and allow the population also to make savings so that they can use those savings in order to take loans from those savings. Like Yunus actually is proposing, he says that in Bangladesh, Grameen Bank became self-sustainable. It does not depend on the investments from the abroad. It basically all the savings comes from the local population. They deposit the money, and the money is given back to the borrowers. But the ultimate goal again is it has to be about the message should not be about the return level. The message should be the more you lose the clients, the better that means that you are actually helping the poor. It's about helping those who are in vulnerable financial vulnerable situation to lift themselves out of poverty.
Okay, you know what? Reading again Mr. Ambassador's François Delahaut's comments, I think it leads to a question, if you allow me. So yes. There are 3 comments. Microfinance has to remain a non-profitable and small-scale activity, otherwise it becomes banking. Then there is no reason to criticize banks for looking for profit, it's their job. And then finally, and this would lead to a question, I do think that microfinance remains altogether a useful service. It just should be well regulated. This is the duty of each state. So then, Ilyas, how do you view the agency of the local state in the country that you are studying? That would be very interesting to hear.
The problem with the country is that the central bank in Kyrgyzstan is dependent on all the international institutions that channel the money inside the country. So they have to comply with those regulations of the international bank. The 3 institutions that international fund, IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the Eurasian Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and there's another institution that also channels a lot of the funds to feed the microfinance sector. So the central bank cannot actually go ahead and apply rigorous rules, because central bank itself is actually taking the money out of those institutions, and those institutions that actually commodify the entire system of money. So here again, the question is, to what extent central bank can actually regulate that? And I believe it's for now, at least at this stage, and I agree with I'm raising the comments of Elmira Satibaldeva, who actually said that the central bank itself is is under control of the international financial institutions, so it cannot actually be that rigorous to apply this. So it's sort of a bit of a trap here, you know. I don't know, maybe Balihar has another take on this.
Yeah, no. I think you've raised some good points there, and in response to the ambassador's point, and I think the ambassador is partly right. I think that banks should be looking to make profit, but I think it's important here to distinguish profit from rent. These are 2 distinct things. Profit is usually the result of productive activities. In political economy, Adam Smith, Karl Marx, Ricardo, John Stuart Mills, John Maynard Keynes, they all make a distinction between profit and rent. And I think this is important, especially in light of Ilyas' work on microcredit, because banks don't necessarily make, or microcredits, they don't make profit as such. They extract rent. And these are 2 different things. Profit usually occurs as a result of commodities that you make. you create wealth through making commodities which you then sell, like making a car, or building homes, or building computers. As a result of that wealth creation, you then are able to sell them, and as a result of that productive capital, productive investment, you achieve profit. Now, I think this is different in the case of the banking and microfinance sector, because they don't necessarily make anything. What do they make? They don't make cars, they don't make computers. What they do have is this. It's almost like a landlord that owns an apartment complex. And I'm sure, Adrian, you are living in Bishkek and you are probably paying extremely excessive rent on the apartment in which you live in. Now, why is it the case that you're paying such high rent? Well, it's because of monopoly power. The landlord is able to have, there's very short supply of this of apartments, and is able to, on the basis of that scarcity, is able to then charge you high rent. They're not producing more goods. It's the same commodity. It's the same apartment that was over 20 years, right? So it's very distinct. And this is the same with microfinance and banks. They don't produce new goods. They don't produce goods like car manufacturers or computers, right? What they are able to do, just like the landlord in which Adrian is paying rent, they are charging rent. And that's what we mean by interest. Interest is rent extraction. You are able to extract money on the basis of purely of ownership of capital, of money asset. And that's, you're not producing more goods. You're not producing, you're not creating wealth. You're merely extracting rent. And I think there needs to be this distinction between profit and rent, or what classical political economists used to call earned income and unearned income. These are two different things. And all too often what happens in our kind of common discourse, in our kind of, lay discussion, we tend to confuse these things, right? And we treat them as if they're all the same. So we treat rent and profit as if they're the same, earned income or earned income and earned income as if they're the same, when they are two very different things. They arise from different properties, different power relationships. And I think we need to be careful when we do talk about profit. Profit, is it profit or is it rent?
Couldn't be more relevant, Balihar, as you have already guessed that here my landlord is quite a wealthy investor in the real estate sector. So I don't know whether this is linked to microfinance, but I think it's linked to macrofinance.
No, you're spot on there, Adrian. Because this isn't just a micro issue; it is a macro issue. And I know Ilyas is familiar with the work of Piketty, and I'm sure you are also, Adrian. And Piketty talks about rentier capitalism, rentier, the ability of people to make money merely because they own existing assets. On the basis of mere ownership of existing assets, you need access to those assets, whether it be land or whether it be apartments or whether it be money. They're able to then charge you for that access. That's all it is. That's all what banking and microfinance is. The ability to charge borrowers access to money. They're not producing new goods, just like the landlord is able to charge you, Adrian, lots of money to access the apartment. The landlord didn't build a new apartment. He just had ownership of an existing asset, is able to then charge you for that. And that's called unearned income. And classical political economists like Adam Smith, Ricardo, Mills, and others said it was important that we distinguish between these two things and we minimize as much as possible unearned income, because unearned income is parasitic. It is immoral to be able to make money just purely on power and nothing more than that, pure power.
I think it is an extremely stimulating discussion, gentlemen, but I'm sure the public and the younger ones, or probably more experienced ones, would really want to ask questions and participate, because this is basically a webinar. So please don't be shy.
From pure personal point of view, of course.
Yes, Mr. Ambassador, we see your point. Absolutely. Unfortunately, smileys appear as squares, so we don't know exactly how to understand these squares. But
well, at least to what I can say to Mr. Ambassador is that
yes,
Piketty does the good analysis of Karl Marx, especially the utility of usage and the market price of the commodity is a great analysis. To the extent I can say that.
All right, gentlemen. I don't want to pressure our interns who must remain free not to participate if so they wish. One of them actually is also sick of COVID and very courageously still came to the webinar. So this is very impressive. So then if there are no other comments, I started to think we should resume. It's already almost 1 hour and a half. Any final comments, impressions, things to say?
Well,
yeah, Ilyas, please.
Yes, I just would like to thank Balihar for really making clear-cut distinctions between profit and rent, and pointing out the weaknesses of my presentation. That I don't think these are weaknesses, but these are to my advantage that you pointed out, because I'm going to explore them more, and I'm definitely going to ponder on that, muse over these ideas, because I'm looking forward for your upcoming book. Using this opportunity, I'd like to say that the Elmir Satibaliva and Balihar are publishing the book. I believe it's on debt and microfinance, right, in Central Asia. So, and I hope that IFIAC will be able to purchase one copy of that book, because it really directly relates to Central Asia, and I'll be able to be able to access the book. So, but again, I would like to highlight the fact that not all the microfinance institutions are bad. It's just the fact that microfinance has pursued the path which wasn't actually initially thought of as it has to pursue. And in case of Central Asia, it's just a myriad of social aspects and historical aspects, like the unequal power relations and land ownership, or in this case, the money ownership, that elitist money ownership, and the inequality that resulted in the siphoning off the profit, the siphoning of the rent out of the unequal, unfairly charged interest rates. So, but again, the credit is, I'm not against the credit at all. Credit is good. And not against the microfinance sector per se, as microfinance was initially invented by Yunus. It's just that we need to reconsider this track. We need to look and seriously revisit the entire which path it's right now pursuing.
All right, final word from Balihar.
Oh, well, firstly, I really enjoyed this this presentation, and in particular, Ilyas's research on microfinance. And just to reiterate, I think he's doing very important work on a much neglected area of Central Asia and political economy. And I would want to encourage him further to pursue this area, and I look forward to seeing his publication on this area, and please do send me whatever you've written on this in the future, Ilyas. And just to thank you, Andres, for the invitation to join this fascinating event, and it's great that I got to meet some of the colleagues, and in particular the ambassador, Mr. Ambassador, and his insightful comments as well. So really, thank you all.
Thank you, Balihar. I do hope we can meet in the flesh.
Me too.
Probably in 2022. Optimistic at some conference. So yes, I do concur. We really wish to see Ilyas's work published in the future. And of course, IFIAC can buy your upcoming volume, Balihar, especially if it's not published by a rentier academic publisher. I'm just joking, I mean, in relation to the conceptual distinction you underline. So, dear guests, dear colleagues, many thanks again. It was extremely stimulating. The webinar will be available on our YouTube channel quite soon. Ilyas, please keep on doing this great work, and hope to see you soon for a cup of tea at IFIAC as soon as everyone feels better.
Yes.
Then bye. Take care.